Buenos días a todos y nada, deciros que es un honor para Bufete Barrilero y Asociados y especialmente para mí estar hoy con vosotros aquí, bueno, en este museo tan maravilloso, ¿no? Para celebrar la segunda jornada internacional Confluencia, Educación y Empresa, que como bien decíamos tiene como objetivo mejorar el atractivo de Euskadi, ¿no? Para atraer y retener a las mejores personas. Egun on danori, ohore handia da, bai niretzat, baita Bufete Barrilero Asociados entzat, gaur hemen zuokaz guztiokaz inguru zoragarri honetan egotea. Hezkuntza eta enpresa bateratzeko, nazioarteko, bigarrengo jardunaldi honetan Euskadiren erakargarritasuna hobetzeaz arituko gara. Talentua, erakarri eta eusteko helburuagaz. Good morning, everyone. As I was saying, it's an honor for me to lead this round table on best international practices in talent recruitment, in which I'm surrounded by the best and the first-class speakers. I'm going to begin by introducing each and one of them, and it goes without saying that they are outstanding in the field. Well, sitting next to me is Andrés Rodríguez Pose. He's a professor of economic geography at the London School of Economics and Political Science, holding the Princess of Asturias chair in his field. He's also the director of the Cañada Blanc Center at LSE. Additionally, he chairs the high-level group on the future of cohesion policy, tasked with proposing the new cohesion policy for the European Union after 2027. Previously, he served as president of Regional Science Association International. With a long track record of research in regional development, institutions, discontent and populism, innovation, and development strategies, his work is widely cited in academic circles. According to Stanford Elsevier list, he has been the world's leading researcher in the field of urban and regional planning for several years. Among his honors is the 2018 ERSA Regional Science Award, considered the highest accolade in the field. He has also received honorary doctorates from Utrecht University and Jönköping University. Sitting next to Andrés is Dan Rosenberg, Head of Talent Attraction at Copenhagen Capacity. As head of talent attraction at a leading investment promotion agency, Dan has deep experience with international talent attraction and global talent mobility trends. For more than a decade, Copenhagen Capacity has been working to increase the attractiveness of Greater Copenhagen region towards international specialists and skilled workers with the goal of sustainable growth in Denmark. Furthermore, Denmark's pioneering green energy transition solutions are not only enhancing the region's attractiveness, but also making a significant impact worldwide. And finally, we have Iván Jiménez, who's the managing director of Bizkai Talent. With over 12 years of leadership experience in talent attraction and management within the Basque science and technology sector, Iván has made significant contributions to the international expansion of Bizkaia Talent. He has fostered conditions to attract, connect, and retain highly qualified professionals in knowledge and innovation. Iván co-founded the European Talent Mobility Forum and developed the B-Basque Talent Network, a broad network of over 20,000 professionals worldwide. He was also a pioneer in establishing the Basque Talent Observatory and unique centers for the professional development and talent search support, B-Basque career development and headhunting, utilizing big data and machine learning in labor markets analysis. Educationally, Iván holds an executive master's in business analytics from ESADE, an MBA from Deusto Business School, and a degree in economic law from the University of Deusto, and holds certificates in employer brand leaderships and programs in digital transformation and machine learning from MIT. Okay, then now, so let's get down to business And our first question, well, you choose, you decide who starts. But our first question is, according to recent studies and rankings, what do you think it is that makes a region attractive? And what do these studies measure? So, I don't know, maybe you perhaps, okay. Andrés.
Egunon. And thank you very much for having me here. I have a slide that might come here
yes.
at this moment. But as has been said in previous panels, talent is becoming far more mobile in recent times. People are moving, are trying to look for opportunities everywhere in the world, and what we have is more and more regions trying to compete, regions and cities, to attract this talent from wherever it is. And here, if I had the slide, I would highlight what we had.
We'll have it in a second.
Yes, I mean, I can do it also from memory, but it's also good.
Hola,
I was working with the OECD as main scientific advisor on this study that was published last year, which is rethinking regional attractiveness. What makes a region attractive? And we highlighted that there are 3 dimensions in which a region has to compete. It has to compete to attract visitors. Why? Because visitors are the first stage. You decide to come to the Basque Country because you come to Bilbao, you look at the city, you look at the people, you look at the environment, and you really like it. It has to compete to attract investors, because it's not just the local capacity and the local potential, which is fundamentally important, but also the idea that if you have dynamic firms, they would attract also other investors, and that would attract talent, which is the 3rd dimension. And here what we have is that we have to start by the basics. People are going to come to a place. They're going to come to Bilbao, or they're going to come to the Basque Country, or they're going to come to Spain, if there are sound economic conditions. If you have the right capacity to innovate, you have the right jobs, and you have the right entrepreneurship that was highlighted by Reme in her previous intervention. But also, if you have the right conditions that would facilitate not just their capacity to find a job, but also to live fulfilling and right lives there, which include a lot of other factors. For example, the case of housing availability. I come from a city like London that is a magnet for talent, but has a significant problem of issues like land availability, housing availability. The Netherlands is also facing similar problems in that respect. You have to look at the well-being and the quality of life. So what is the well-being, what is the health system and the quality of the health system? And something that in Spain we are actually doing rather well. But in other cases, you also have to look at the overall sort of environment, the sort of perception of subjective well-being, and the conditions like, for example, education and education for their children. I think Jan was talking about that just a moment ago. You have to look in a world in which competition is global at connectivity. And within connectivity, what you'll find is that you have to look at the 2 dimensions. The physical connectivity, how quickly can you get and connect to people you're doing business with physically, but also digitally. How reliable are your, let's say, digital system, how fast, how efficient, etc. And then you have to look at other factors, like, for example, the whole issue of the quality of life that is looked by what is called by my friend Richard Florida the amenities, which could be natural, so how difficult it is or how easy it is to go and look at places of natural beauty, and how easy can you get to the mountains or can you get to the sea, for example, but also cultural amenities, which are absolutely fundamental for young people. And if you have all this and you work on all these dimensions, what you end up is with places that are attractive, and are attractive for the people you want to attract, which is high-end level talent. And let's be clear, there has been a lot of talk about senior talent, and I am one of the main advocates of senior talent. Mm-hmm. But people my age don't move, or move much less. I mean, I lived in the UK for the last 30 years, and I left Madrid, where I'm originally from, when I was 23. I mean, I came back for a couple of years to Galicia, but then I left again. But my last move was at the age of 26. At my age, it's far more difficult to actually move to another place. So you want to attract those 2 people, and those 2 people that can actually move, which are fundamentally, either before they go to university, so at the very young age of 18, or if they go to postgraduate 22, 23, or when they start work, which is in their early 20s to their mid to late 20s. Of course, you can attract people later on, but very few of them are going to work, and the difference would be, do you want to attract people that just want to come and play golf in the fantastic golf courses in the Basque Country, because you have John Ram growing here, exactly. Or do you want to come people that can actually contribute and make Bilbao and the Basque Country and wherever you are far more dynamic?
Yeah, perfect. Now,
yeah, I fully agree with so many things. You've said it very well, Andres. I think the regarding rankings, if we should come back to that question, you can say there are so many rankings out there. And of course, as an investment promotion agency representing Copenhagen, the capital region of Denmark, and Denmark as a whole, you should always choose the rankings that you are in top, right? So that's you can always find those. So there's a trick about rankings, but I think the big rankings that we are looking at is the INSEAD's Global Talent Competitiveness Index. And that is interesting because it looks at more than 100 parameters, everything from the regulatory setting to how we attract international talent, how we welcome international talent, how we retain international talent, and then you can say overall factors in the educational system in terms of that. So there we are ranking quite high, I think, on the 4th place, Denmark as a nation. You also have other rankings, and I continue to mention the Expat Global Insider, the Internation's Expat Global Insider, where Denmark, on the other hand, is on the bottom of the rankings when it comes to social integration. So there is also something about being, of course, aware about where you're good at and then where you're not so good at in terms of not overselling the place. But the reason for I guess, inviting Copenhagen Capacity here today is because we've been working with talent attraction on behalf of a region for more than 12 years. So I think we were some of the earliest investment promotion agencies working with, you can say, in a government intervention way, promoting the place. And I think that is a huge shift of, you can say, view from the talent's perspective. Today, they are rather choosing a location than the employer. So it's more important that they end up in a place where they can find the livability, where they can find the work-life balance, or whatever factors is important for that particular talent. In our case in Denmark, it's probably also the whole green energy transition, which we have very high ambition. So you also get to come to a place, even though you're not working for Vestas, producing windmills, you're at least coming to a place or a country where you take the whole energy or the climate crisis very seriously. So that's some comments to the whole ranking, and I think we will probably come back to it. But the other side of the coin here is awareness. So are the candidates aware of all the good rankings and the good conditions that you are? But I think we will probably come back to that, how we can create that awareness among the international talents.
Yeah, perfect. As you've said before, no, 12 years ago you started with and there's been like this improvement. But
yeah, exactly.
Because you were aware.
Yeah, exactly. And today I just read last night a report that today 45% of all the investment promotion agencies worldwide, in a survey that was done, are today having a focus on talent. In addition to, of course, the more traditional work that they are doing, attracting foreign companies and investments to the place.
Very interesting. Iván, from your point of view and from your experience, please.
Yeah, in the case of the rankings, what they measure is the potential of one territory. So it doesn't mean that these territories are located in the first places, are the places that are really attracting more talent than the rest. But they've got that potential. Usually, they use different indicators. sometimes more than 100, but basically they are distributed in this way. Well, first one will be about how business-friendly is your place, and regulatory frameworks, etc., legal framework, taxes, etc. That's a very important issue, not only related to the implementation of companies, which is necessary, and that's another point, job opportunities, but also when it comes to talent attraction, the people that are going there. I think that here, for example, in the Basque Country, we are doing quite well playing with our tax system. When it comes to people coming from abroad, we've got some tax benefits, quite big. Italy is doing something similar too, and I think that this is one of the ways to keep in. On the other hand, it's very important, the educational system. It has already been mentioned before, but it starts not only at university level, but in primary school also. So people that are moving to other places are looking sometimes to develop their whole career, or at least some years of their career. An educational system is really, really important. On the other hand, I will remark the innovation. There is a very big correlation between the position that you've got in this kind of rankings and the position that you've got in rankings related to innovation, and that attracts talent. I mean, it's important. The research also with innovation, but especially applied research, okay, and closely related to companies. On the other hand, I will remark the quality of life, and we have seen how senior people that want to come back to the Basque Country, they choose that as the main reason to come back. So when we've got conversations with them, and as an average, they are 32 years old. It happens the same in Boston or in, I don't know, in Munich or in London when we organize this kind of meetings. The first reason is always the same. They usually, the perception at least is that I'm going to lose something because, of course, they are coming from the big hubs of talent, okay? And we have to take that in consideration. So they are, usually they are in the 10 top places in the world, so that's very important. Then I say quality of life, which involves, for example, a good health system. That's very important. Leisure. When it comes to health system, recently we had some elections here, and the main issue was the health system. Now there is a review about by Eurostat, about the main problems that they should be discussed in the next European elections. So the first one is social exclusion, and the second one is health system. By the way, the European Union has nothing to do with that because it's something that is related with the states, or in our case, the autonomies. But it's a very big worry at the moment about that. And then job opportunities, as I said, this is very important. You can get the place with the best quality of life, but not job opportunities. One example, for example, a place with not so many job opportunities, but a good quality of life is Lisbon, okay? And they attracted thousands of digital nomads that at the same time have created another problem with housing. So local people is not able at the moment to afford that, so they have decided to finish with this kind of benefits for digital nomads. And another important point, I would say, that is inclusivity and diversity. Usually, we used to think, okay, whoever who can to our country needs to adapt to us. And at the moment, in this no balance between the needs of talent, or this lack of talent, is the person, is the people, is the talent who decides whether he wants to live or she wants to live in that place or not. And according to inclusiveness of that place, that could be perhaps not the main driver, but once they are living there, don't they feel love, don't they feel that they can be part of that society, they definitely leave that place and they move to another one. So I think that more or less these are the key questions.
And as from what's been now said, you were speaking about there are some hubs that, you know, like they are coming from the most important hubs worldwide, no? And then who are these? Why are they performing so well? And what strategies have they been applying or making along the years, so to be nowadays considered like the best hubs? And should know, Andrés the other day was speaking, but do we have to compete? Has it got to be a competition, or should we, like, worldwide have, I don't know, maybe?
Well, here it's an important point. Do we have to compete? The answer is yes. You cannot stay still. I mean, I think Jon was highlighting, we're playing in the Champions League. No, we're not. By relying on local talent, like Athletic, you might be known, but so is Preston North End. If you have local talent, and nurturing local talent is absolutely fundamental, but the only way you can actually improve local talent is by also importing talent and having that capacity to do both. So that you can be not just like this year, that you had the Gabarra for the first time since 1984, but you can have it on a regular basis, which would be ideal, but by combining local talent with international talent. And this is the idea of attracting talent. You need to compete. Of course, it's very difficult to compete. And you'll say, what is the role of strategies? I think strategies, and forgive me about this, count for very little. What count is fundamentals. When you get to the fundamentals, the strategies count a lot. And that makes the difference. But you're saying, who are at the top, at the hubs? And we tend to look at normally, and people obsess about this. I know because I am a member of one of the biggest indices in ranking cities. And I get calls from big cities saying, why is my city down 3 positions this year? And you have 2 types. You have the indices, the global indices of quality of life, in which you have Copenhagen and Vienna and Zurich and Melbourne and Sydney coming always more or less on top with some changes there. And then you have the ones for doing business and attracting talent, which are normally the megastar cities. The New Yorks, the Londons, the Paris, the San Franciscos, Singapores, Dubais of this world. And where, unfortunately, for us, most of our cities do not appear in the rankings of big cities. There's Madrid and Barcelona, but then when you go to everything together, there's very few that comes together. And my focus would not be to obsess too much about the main rankings, but to obsess about the other rankings, the ones that actually make the conditions or send the signals for individuals that want to come, these digital nomads that Iván was talking about, to places like Bilbao to come and look at Bilbao. And I said there are 2 points of entry. One is for studying, and the second one is for work. When we look at studying, I mean, I know that Luis was highlighting before that we are in universities far better than we were, possibly true, but the top Spanish university is, across rankings, at levels of around 150. If you go to the Basque Country, the University of the Basque Country, whichever ranking you look, is at levels of 600 in the world. And the University of Deusto is between 800 and 1,000. Most of my students don't look beyond university number 50. And that is a problem. Because we're saying we want to attract the top talent, and the main entry point is at the level of university. If our universities do not appear in those rankings, we are not going to be able to compete globally, no matter how good people like Dan and Iván are promoting that. The second point of entry is the question of indices of doing businesses. And here it might be local, and they're more and more becoming local, but there's also national. And we have a problem as a country, as Spain, in this respect, in which, I mean, doing business is not the easiest task. I always say there's one thing is living in Spain, where the quality of life is fantastic. And in the ranking I have, which is organized by the Mori Foundation in Japan, in which I participate, Madrid and Barcelona are in the top 10 in terms of quality of life. When it comes to innovation, that was highlighted by Iván, when it comes to doing businesses, when you have 60 of the top cities in the world, they languish in the bottom half. And that is a significant problem. So how can we facilitate the whole activity of businesses? How can we encourage this potential entrepreneurship that we have to move forward? And that has to be done by digitalizing, but increasing transparency, but facilitating the whole idea of setting up a business, organizing businesses, etc., which for me is much more than going beyond the fiscal incentives. I know that fiscal incentives have been mentioned a couple of times before, but I'm really skeptical. Fiscal incentives are when everything else fails. If you haven't got the right human capital, you haven't got the right firms, you have the wrong institutional conditions, if you haven't got the right local firms that can actually connect to those people that are coming, to that investment that is coming, then you need the fiscal incentives. But in the US, California, Connecticut, New York State virtually give no fiscal incentives. The biggest fiscal incentives are fundamentally coming from places like Kentucky, Alabama, Indiana, which are places that can really not compete with the rest on everything else.
Perfect. So, how can we make? Yeah, Dan, give us your opinion, because there's so many questions that I want to make.
I fully agree. The fundamentals are key here. Do you have an open business environment? Companies that are open to hire internationals? Are they inclusive? Do they accept you not coming and speaking the local language, meaning speaking English? You know, is it easy to settle in the country, like getting a social security number and getting your kids into school? These are the fundamentals that, of course, we as a very small organization cannot affect in the daily interactions between the international talents coming to the country. But I would say that I mean, considering we have a huge problem here, we have a talent shortage, not only in Denmark, but also in EU. Growing population getting older, decreasing birth rates, calling for government, you can say, interaction here. Because why is that so? The companies are fantastic at selling their own companies. And obviously that is not enough. They're not good at selling the place. So that role we take humble on our shoulders to basically point out what are the strongholds, you know, talking on behalf of a region, on behalf of a nation. And in our case, it's the green energy transition. We are leading, we are top of the list here. It's also the life science sector. We are top here performing. And if we are to continue a stable economic growth, we need to focus on what we are good at. And that is our strategy, basically, making sure that you have the whole well-functioned system of creating awareness, making sure that you welcome these international talents, making sure that they want to stay also after arriving in Denmark, in our case, also talking about, you know, it is competition. It's a matter of supply and demand. In your case, coming from London, it's a magnet. Talents have London top of mind. They have New York, they have Zurich, they have other places top of mind. And then you have the tier 2, tier 3 locations, regions, cities around the world. Obviously, they are not top of mind when you talk to talents around the world. They wouldn't mention Copenhagen because they don't know Copenhagen. We are not top of mind. So we need to promote, you can say, what we are good at in a very focused way. And we try to do that. If it makes a big difference, I don't know. Currently, we have 300,000 internationals working in Denmark, close to 13% of the working population. And I just checked it up. We have 5% out of those coming from outside of EU. So, sorry, my Spanish isn't the best, but I did understand that you have very few non-EU candidates coming to the Basque region, if you exclude the Latin America also. And that is, of course, a huge problem in the coming years, because we have been relying on Spanish talent coming to Copenhagen and study at the Technical University of Copenhagen and then wanting to stay. That is not the situation any longer. Ivan told me the other day, there's been a huge shift. Today we are lacking talent. Years ago, some not so many years ago, you had high unemployment rate. So we need to stand together in terms of also attracting talent from outside of EU, I believe. And that is a common task or a big thing that we can collaborate on within Europe. But at the end of the day, it is a competition.
Yeah, last day in Estonia, we were talking about it with the director of Copenhagen Capacity, Nicola, a very good friend. And his speech was about collaboration and how can you go ahead with that when we are competing at the same time. No? And, but there are many questions that has been already mentioned and very important. Well, Dan is Swedish. And how long have you been living in Copenhagen?
Since 2006.
When did you learn the language?
Actually, my father is Danish and my mother is Swedish, so I speak both languages fluently. But you can ask me how many friends do I have that are Danish?
How many?
One. Talking about the bottom ranking here, yeah. Sorry, Iván.
Yeah, this is a very important question because usually, for example, Basque people that we meet in these places, Copenhagen last year, 65 people, and 80% of them Basque people that wanted to come back. Most of them, they even don't speak the language. They don't speak Danish. And so the first contact and the first years there were like, okay, you can manage in English, there is no problem. Of course, if you want to go up in the company, please, you need to speak the language. But at least this first landing was absolutely in English. Okay, so this is a challenge for us. I mean, it's not a coincidence the kind of talent that is coming to us, most of them outside the European Union. So the language is very important. And we can't adapt, obviously, our society and suddenly pretend that everyone is speaking English in 2, 3, or 4 years' time. That's impossible, absolutely impossible. And there are many reasons for that, and why this is happening here, and so and so. But I mean, this is one of the challenges that we've got. These cities that are located in the top of the ranking usually are the places where you can work and live in English. In Singapore, for example, Switzerland, some places in Switzerland, also the main cities, of course, I'm not talking about the Alps, okay, but in Switzerland that are located, the main cities are located there. Even if you go to Germany, in Berlin, you can live in English. That's true. And in Munich, more and more, because now, because of the lack of talent, even the companies accept you, the meetings, in English. So it has changed a lot. So for us at the moment, that's one of the main challenges. When it comes to the perception of inclusiveness, I think that we are located in a very good position. I mean, if you ask to international people, international talent, which are the places where they can feel best welcome, the Spanish state is located always in one of the first positions. So that's an advantage for us. But again, when it comes to doing business and so, we've got a lot of things to do. So we don't have one-stop shop already, even if we're trying to do. Last week, for example, in Estonia, they show us all their system, digitalized system, where you can do everything with the administration, everything online, even living, I don't know, in the other part of the world. You can you can get an e-residency just in a couple of hours. So this is an incredible advantage for them. Again, it can be happen also, and it's happening, that because of this successful, the housing problem is increasing too. And the locals are complaining about it and complaining about the startup ecosystem, the unicorns, and so, because they are becoming like a real estate company at the end when they get the funds. So it's really difficult, the balance.
Very interesting. As for the third question, we were speaking about, well, actually you were speaking about public organization, relationship with the public administration. And so how in these regions, public institutions, businesses, and the educational system, how do they collaborate? And if they do, are they like performing and doing it in the same direction, or how's their
All right, so
experience?
you were asking for the solutions, and this
Yes,
is where,
yeah, I'm
where
really
we get
worried,
into the solutions
actually.
now. And I'm going to start with the negatives to then go to the positives. That in general, there are three actors that need to collaborate. The first one are firms, and I think firms are the key actor in this role, with educational institutions, and then with the public sector and with government. In most cases, they don't collaborate. Each one tends to their own business, they work in silos, and then there's very, very little coordination. Normally when that happens, which is the norm, the ones that survive are the ones that have got the strongest endowments. If you have a very strong university, your university can drive everything else. If you have a very strong fabric of firms, they can drive everything else. If you have a strong government and transparent government, it can push everything else, like in the case of Estonia, that Iván was highlighting. But the most successful places, especially those that are in the middle of the rank, the ones that are, let's say, at the bottom half of the first division but want to get into the Champions League, are the ones where you put everything together to work together. That you have universities collaborating with firms, generating the skills that are needed by local firms, that then can attract other firms, or good universities can attract talent that then would feed into those firms, or can attract people that would create firms that would collaborate with the local firms. In an environment created by government and the public sector that facilitates those transfers and those businesses. There's no point in having universities like the one we have in the Basque Country or in the rest of Spain, where any academic is penalized for collaborating with a firm rather than rewarded, as is the case in the United States, for example. And that also undermines the capacity of those universities to do research and to teach and generate better students. So you need to create the mechanisms that work together and put everything in the same direction. In order to do that, you have to have strong leadership. Leadership coming from fundamentally the government, whether it is the local municipal government or the regional government or the national government. Leadership coming from universities through their rectors and their capacity to engage, to have not just vice rectors dealing with teaching and research and education, which is the norm, but also dealing with outreach and connection to firms. And you have to have also the leadership in firms, but also through associations like the Círculo de Empresarios, the Confederation of Entrepreneurs, the chambers of commerce that can work together. And one thing we have to bear in mind, and it has been highlighted by Iván, is also the potential backlash, the political dimension of this. Because talent can come to Lisbon, but then if the conditions are not right, it would leave. And eventually, it will fall. But even in the strongest cities, you can have this backlash. I live in London, and London has been a magnet for talent, but I work in the most international university. 75% of our students are foreign, 75. Most of them from outside the European Union. And many of them want to come and work in London. But that has created tensions with the rest of the country, tensions within London, in access to housing, in access to top jobs, in people feeling displaced in their own country, and how you combine the economic dimension with the political dimension. And that's a fine line to thread, because you might end up, and the ultimate example is the UK, a situation with Brexit, in which many of my colleagues and friends that have been working in very different areas of economic activity in London, in a city, let's not forget, London was a city that was declining relative to the rest of the UK between the 1930s and the 1990s. What happened in the 1990s? The single market and the attraction of massive talent from Europe and from the rest of the world. Many of those people, as a result of Brexit, have felt that they are unwelcome and have left. So now, in terms of creating economic dynamism and attracting talent, although London, because of its size, is always and will be a magnet, is much less of a magnet. It's like a battery that has been worn a bit because of not paying enough attention to the political dimension that comes with the attraction of foreigners, but also many foreigners that end up working at the high end of the level, pushing house prices up and the rest.
Very interesting. Dan and Iván, something you want to?
Yeah, no, I would want to remark what you have said about the motivation of researchers and universities. In the places where it happens the most, I mean, places such as the United States, the UK, Israel, whatever, there are plenty of incentives, particularly for the researchers that are working at the university. So one thing is that the government can lead that start of the collaboration, but if there is not a real implication of the particularly people of the university and companies, I mean, it won't work. I mean, this is one of the key questions. I think that here in our ecosystem, it doesn't happen. And so I think that is that of the things that we should develop. And yes, perhaps a better framework. I know that it doesn't depend mainly on our Basque institutions, but it's something that we should think about and press about it.
Well, first of all, we have an unemployment rate of 2.9% in Denmark. So that is obviously asking the researcher below the sustainable levels. I would say that what the universities are doing in Denmark, they're doing a great job, by the way, and have a great collaboration with the companies. Obviously, that is not enough. So, and beside that, it's actually outside of our jurisdiction. We are not really involved in all aspects of the talent supply in Denmark. We are focusing on the internationals and international talent attraction. And I think that is still the key to the solutions here. Because if you look at the international students, there are more than 40,000 coming to Denmark every year. And 60% of them have left the country 2 years after taking a master's degree. And that is very low-hanging fruit to make sure that you want to keep these international students in the country. They already got adapted to the culture and maybe learned a bit of Danish. So we are actually doing this together with the 8 universities, offering career development programs for master students, increasing the retention rate with 59%. And that is very important, I would say. Yeah.
Does the public, like you're speaking always about...
Yeah, and so that was I lost my next point here. And you would say, in Denmark, we actually do not have a national strategy for talent attraction coming from the government, due to maybe also a bit, they're a bit afraid of touching this agenda. Denmark has also been known for being a bit closed country, especially when it comes to refugees. But that is why we have taken the initiative to form, you can say, the closest to a national strategy in terms of talent attraction. We have a partnership with 37 different partners all over Denmark, all the 8 universities. We have unions, we have cluster organizations. They have turned out to be very important because they are representing the companies. They are close to the companies, and companies are key. It is for the companies that we are doing this right. It's not for the talent at the end of the day. And this has proven to be very efficient in terms of gathering all the forces around this agenda. But there is not a continuity in this, right? Since it's not a government or a national official program or scheme. It's basically funded by EU projects, which tend to be 3 to 5 years, or typically 3 years. So when a project is running out, then we have a problem. Then there is no continuation. We can hopefully apply for other projects, and we have been quite successful at that, also getting private foundations. We've just launched a project to attract researchers, to make sure that Denmark become more known as an attractive research destination. It's 3 of our biggest industry foundation who has granted us this 3-year pilot project. So our wish, our call for the politicians is basically a national strategy for talent attraction. I think that would create a more long-term and stable focus on this whole agenda.
Thank you so much. And for the last question, we're having a lot of influx of population coming from everywhere, as we see from political situations all around and whatever. And so we are facing like new challenges like every now and again. How do these regions react from this point of view, from your experience?
Well, I think I already mentioned the problem of what sort of population do you want to attract? And of course, a country like Spain has transformed itself since the 1990s. When I left the country, 99.5% of the population was born in Spain. Mm-hmm. Now we are levels beyond 14. In some regions like Madrid, we are above 20-something%. So that has led to a transformation. And here the question is, how do you integrate what is a far more diverse population into your, let's say, social fabric, which is much easier said than done, because we're seeing a lot of tensions emerging across the whole of Europe, fundamentally as a result of that. And here there's a combination. First, people become integrated when they get jobs, and especially when they get jobs in which they can fulfill their talent and their potential. So what we have here is that create a market that is flexible enough to allow people to channel their talents and their ideas as soon as possible into the labor market in areas where they can actively contribute to society and not become a burden. Then there's a second need in terms of highlighting the connectivity and the links between what is being done for the local population and what is being done for the new arrivals. Since we've been talking about football a lot, Iñaki Williams, yes, or whoever is playing, so Vesga, for example, are going to become much better players if they interact with better players coming from abroad. But also these other players can help the local players, the foreign players, understand the Spanish game or the Spanish league much better, and it's beneficial for both. We also have to mention, and I think it was mentioned by Remy, that talent is not always at the high end. You don't want, I mean, you want to attract people with high levels of education, but you want to make sure that all talent can be fulfilled through different channels. And here, you might want to integrate, and there's a shortage in Spain. We have this, there's a lot of noise coming from upstairs. We have this double situation in which we have gone from a country where we had virtually a very small percentage of the population with higher education to a very high level of population with higher education. But we have a dual system that, on the one hand, a lot of people with a university degree cannot find jobs because there's a phenomenal mismatch between what is being on offer in terms of training and education and what is actually needed by firms. And then we have a lot of people, so until relatively recently, 1/3 of our population left high school without a degree or just with a high school degree. So that's one of the highest in Europe. We were just behind Portugal. And that talent was very often lost. So we need to focus on issues like how do we use that talent through better vocational training, FAP, not just at the level of secondary, but as they have in Denmark, or they have in Sweden, or they have in Germany, at university education. And then on top of that, Angel was mentioning he was very reluctant when in his company there was a compulsory training that was introduced. If in the current situation, we think that what we have learned when we were 16, 18, or what I learned when I did my PhD and I was 26 or 27, I can survive in the fast-paced cycle of technological change, we are completely wrong. We need to have and adapt to the new challenges. And this is where the public sector and governments can play an important role. Because it was mentioned, I think it was also by Angel, that small firms, which are the bread and butter of our society, very often cannot actually deal with all these fast pace of changes. And we cannot have small and medium-sized firms that are permanently worried about the future. We need to have small and medium-sized firms that are confident that they can thrive in the future. But in order to do that, there needs to be the training systems, the mechanisms, the support, the elan and the impulse and the dynamism to allow them to worry about what they do best and make sure that they can get the sources of knowledge that are needed, that they can get the skills that are needed from that pool of talent that is coming, but also from the schemes that are put forward by governments, from the support of agencies, in order to make sure that they can deliver on their tasks and therefore dynamize and make our places a much better place to live.
Completely, I'm completely on your side.
I agree, again. Hiring international talent is complex. And we realized 3 years ago, when we had done a couple of bigger projects focusing on talent attraction and retaining international students, that it was as big as a problem for the companies, and especially the small and medium-sized companies, to even open up for and considering hiring international talent. So we don't have a problem among startups. Sometimes it's 80-100% internationals working in those companies. In the big global companies like Novo Nordisk, like Maersk and so on, of course they are global as it is and very diverse and international. But it is the huge volume of small and medium-sized companies. And the alternative for them is, of course, unsuccessful recruitment and thereby lost growth opportunities, meaning that we have a whole sector of companies who will never get into the stage of being a big company, which is another problem that we have in our economy. So that is calling for very handheld, you can say, maturing of these companies, inspiring them to start out with and motivating them to even consider hiring an international, and then educating them about the policies and how you can recruit a non-EU candidate, for example. And there is things to be done also on the regulatory and visa schemes that we are offering in Denmark for non-EU candidates that is a bit rigid and could be improved. And then when you hire the international talent, you got to onboard them. And that is also complex, onboarding an international talent, especially if they come with a family. That might take half a year to onboard, considering it takes 3 weeks to onboard a Danish local candidate. And talking about bringing your family, you have a spouse coming to Denmark. They also need a job, basically, because you cannot survive on one salary in a country like Denmark. So if the spouse is without a job, there is also a very high likelihood that the whole family will they will either divorce, hope not that happens, but they will end up leaving the country because their accompanying spouse didn't get a job. So there are many things. We've just been involved in Talent Hub, a EU-funded project with IOM, International Organization of Migration, a UN body who came up with a catalog of, I think, some 20 different recommendations. And among them is easier access and free access to language training, help and support for accompanying spouses to get a job, but also even more focus on getting the students into a student job or an internship early as possible, while they're studying, and many more recommendations. We just received them, and we are looking into it, and we'll come up with our own conclusions based on that. And then the whole retention, how do you retain? On average, we have internationals staying in Denmark, 50% have left after 6 years, which I think is also a pretty good number, considering that they started out being mobile and choose to relocate to Denmark. That means that they will, at the end of the day, probably go home to their home country, having troubles maybe with their families, taking care of family and so forth, or they got a better job opportunity elsewhere. So I'm actually quite content having half of the internationals for 6 years in Denmark. But the ones we lose in the short run, for example, due to the spouses not getting a job, there is definitely more to be done.
Well, apart from everything that has been already mentioned, there's a lot. Those places that have succeeded are, apart from everything, I mean, they have developed a very important urban plans and infrastructure plans also. One of the main examples, for example, could be Singapore. So imagine in a place with very high density, they are trying to even improve that to attract even more and more international talents. And I go back to the inclusivity question that it was already mentioned, but this is a very, very important thing because it is not only about the society, which is, but especially about the companies. And here, the average of employees in our small and medium companies is 5.6, something like this, whereas in Germany is about 25. So our small and medium companies are really, really small. So I understand that it's very difficult for them to try to integrate or to be so inclusive when they have been always working with local people. I mean, you can change them that in just in 1 week, in 1 month, in 1 year, okay? But this is just a question to keep in mind. And going in deep about it, I think that the idea of developing a real talent strategy in the companies adapted to the needs of the currently talent, it is very important. I mean, we have seen many data there, and there are other data to see on internet, how the needs of talent nowadays have nothing to do with the needs of talent 20 years ago. So it is now the company in this context where the balance is in favor sometimes of the talent. They need to adapt as quickly as possible because, again, yes, we are friends. We are very good friends from Copenhagen and other places in Europe, and we collaborate, and I've been advisor in this study that has been mentioned now. But we are competing also. That's a reality, especially when it comes to these kind of talents that everyone is looking for.
Exactly. We want to play the champions. We want to win the champions, don't we? So, as what we've heard today, we have to be aware of the situation. Actually, we are aware of the situation. We're trying to attract people here in the Basque Country. We need the stakeholders to play together in the same game, and we need to create good working conditions. And if we make things as we should, we will be playing and winning, won't we? Yes. Thank you so much. I think we're on time, and we are going now with this coffee outside, and I would ask you to be punctual later if it's possible. Thank you so much.